Welcome to the IT Career Energizer podcast. For anyone who wants to build and grow a career in IT, develop and improve your strengths and skills, be inspired and motivated by the successes of others, manage your career progression, and achieve your IT career goals. And now, your host, Phil Burgess.
Welcome to episode 115 of the IT Career Energizer podcast. My guest on today's show is David Linthicum. David is the Chief Cloud Strategy Officer at Deloitte Consulting and was recently named the #1 cloud influencer in a report by Apollo Research. David is an experienced CTO and CEO, as well as an author of multiple books on computing. He has also presented at more than 500 conferences, has published more than 5,000 articles, and has a weekly podcast on cloud computing. So, David, could you maybe add to that intro and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Chief Cloud Strategy Officer at Deloitte. I've been with the firm about a year. Prior to that, I was with a firm called Cloud Technology Partners that was sold a couple of years ago to Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And prior to that, I had my own firm. And prior to that, I was CTO 4 times, different publicly traded companies, all sold. And just really kind of work at and have for the last 30 years as far as where the technology ball is going to be kicked, what's next for technology, what we should be focused on, what kind of problems we'll be solving, coming up, and how to align services and technology and other things into the future of computing. So that's what I focus on.
I'm sure we'll get into a bit later, but is there anything in particular that sort of motivates you or gives you the drive in terms of what you focus on within the IT sector?
I think it's the ability to help people ultimately. So if you look at why I'm here at Deloitte after doing so many years of different companies that were kind of more entrepreneurial in nature that led to exits, is the ability to kind of sit down with the global 2,000 IT folks and instruct them on how to leverage computing properly, or at least try to lead them in the right direction. And so helping them become better at their business, helping them allowing IT to become more valuable, helping them to change directions, helping them to improve upon what they're doing, and therefore kind of life and welfare of the employees and their customers. And so I get a kick out of that. I get a kick out of people, not necessarily me being successful, but people who I work for being successful, and people who depend on me being successful, and people who take my advice being successful, people who read my books, listen to my podcasts, read my blog. So I always think I'm looking across the table at someone that is trying to solve an issue and they're looking for assistance.
David, can you maybe share a career tip, perhaps one that the audience don't know and should?
The biggest thing I found out there in terms of people being successful versus, just kind of cruising through life or coasting through life is people who are willing to self-learn and become kind of the autodidact out there, and the ability to kind of think in terms of where things are going, become interested in the particular topic and subject matter, and go off and listen to videos and take training and read a book and really kind of practice with the technology. Perhaps, write an article. You don't have to do that, but it always makes things a bit more concrete for me. And the ability to, in essence, increase your skill sets, increase your knowledge, using some sort of a self-motivating way, ultimately is where great employees come from and where people get excited about what they do. And the other thing is, get a passion about what you're doing. I mean, if you don't have a passion about what you're doing every day, obviously it's work and we're going to have some good days and bad days, but you get excited about where your career is about and what you're doing within your career. It's time to look for a new career.
Sure. You obviously touched on how to self-motivate. Do you have any particular approaches for yourself?
Yeah, I think it's the ability to kind of see the benefit from the work that you're putting into it. When I first was writing books back when I was in my 20s, the benefit was a year or two away, if that, and there wasn't this kind of immediate fulfillment. And I think that if you're going to become somebody who's very much self-motivated, you kind of have to get into the work and reward kind of way of doing it. So you need to figure out how to, not necessarily you're going to get a big check from somebody, but you have to figure out that you're proud of, or there's some sort of an event that occurred, where you're you see the value, you see the pleasure in doing so. You feel that, feel the set of accomplishment. And I always tell people there has to be that. There has to be you putting a lot of effort in, typically to the point where you could be a bit uncomfortable for a bit. You're doing things kind of out of your comfort zone, but you're recognized for it, even if it's just self-recognition as someone who's kind of stepping forward and making things happen. And I think that's kind of the reason we work.
David, can you maybe tell us about your worst IT career moment and what you learned from that experience?
Boy, you got a couple of days. The worst IT career moment was when you're young and you make core mistakes. And there was, many times, and probably when I was working at Mobil Oil, I had a system that I was looking to build that I thought really should be something that added value, to the existing infrastructure there and would be valuable to the leadership. And the reality is I wasn't listening to anybody but myself. And so what I thought was a requirement for the system, it wasn't necessarily a requirement for the company or other people in the company. And so I built this very elaborate system that, virtually no one used. And I learned a lesson. I learned the fact that it's not only what you consider a good idea, but you have to normalize your good ideas with everybody else and get your peer groups to weigh in, get the market to weigh in, and ultimately use those as data points to make sure you're building the right stuff. And I failed miserably then, but I learned a lesson.
Right. So how do you do things differently now? Do you have any particular tips?
Yeah, everything is going to be done around research. So I kind of, take the ability to understand the market, as a science more so than some feeling or opinions. And I always tell, my clients, the market doesn't care about your opinions. Ultimately, we have to look at what the facts are, where the market's going, what technology people are leveraging, how they're leveraging it, and what we see as the current trends coming forward beyond the analyst reports, which everybody reads, but in terms of kind of determining, using any kind of data points you have access to, figuring out where the ball, as I mentioned earlier on, is going to be kicked. It just becomes a science more so than anything else. I mean, I've been excellent at, excellent predicting the market for the last 20 years, and certainly around the cloud computing stuff. And the reality is there was no magic to it or no intelligence to it. I just took the time to do the research and put everything into a line and determine the conclusions from the research that I did and the data points that I gathered. And I think ultimately the secret is that there's no secret. There's just a lot of hard work that comes into you understanding where things are going and you, in essence, putting a point of view toward this and getting behind the point of view with product plans and technology plans and service plans and market plans and those sorts of things. And that's incredibly fulfilling to me.
So moving away from your worst moment, can you maybe tell us about your career highlight or greatest success?
Yeah, I think the biggest success in my career was really EAI, Enterprise Application Integration, which was one of these things where I believed in it, and I started to write articles and papers around the fact in the mid 90s that we really need to think about how we're going to do data integration between all these various source and target systems. And at the time, it was ERP systems such as SAP, talking to legacy environments, and that was something that wasn't solved. And really kind of putting a science and approach and a technology stack behind it. And what happened, we were coming out of client server, certainly people understood middleware, and that's what I was writing and speaking about. But as I started to get these books, I wrote a treatment for a book and started to write different chapters for it. I couldn't get anybody to publish it. And I was like, just discouraged. And suddenly someone did. And then it took off like a rocket and became kind of a meme unto itself. Enterprise application integration, conferences were built around it, whole companies were built around it. I shifted from my job at Mobil Oil and took a job as a CTO of Saga Software, which was promptly moved into the AI space, and they became a big successful force in the market. And that was a huge success because, number one, I was able to kind of get around the fact that lots of people were telling me no, and I didn't take that for an answer. And ultimately, I just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And it turned out to be a concept that was resonated with lots of companies, lots of enterprises. And it sold, 20,000 books, translated into, 21 different languages. And it's still, one of the best-selling IT books today. And that was something beyond my expectations for myself that would, be able to make that happen. And I reached a level of confidence that was way more than, where I was in the early 90s. And so I look at that as something where I persevered, I went ahead and put some hard work and IP behind it. There was no luck involved with it. I kept at it, and ultimately it turned out. And I've used that several times in my career, probably not to the results of that and the same sort of impact in my mind. I just kind of look at things that way.
Yep, well, that's great. In hearing about how you sort of took that approach and had one particular goal or one sort of mission, it's something definitely people should be able to relate to, and hopefully they can apply to their own careers.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that people typically do this stuff in incremental levels, and it's okay to do it, even if you're getting an idea published inside the company so people understand it and ask you a question about it, or if you're going to get up and talk in front of a group of people, or if you're going to put forward something that's going to be, driving a team effort and a team success. Even little successes are going to be big successes in your mind, and you build upon that.
And I think the other part of it, which you've touched on as well, is the effect it has on your own personal confidence as well, and how that can actually have a significant impact on your career development.
Yeah, personal confidence is everything. And you think about it, whether you're learning how to ride a motorcycle or you're doing athletics or, you actually are running your career, you kind of build on that. And you need to not get necessarily wrapped around the failures, but learn from them and move on. Every successful person out there, to a person, has failed many times. And the reality is that they learn from the failure, they move on, and they build upon it.
Yep, absolutely. So, David, what excites you about the future of the IT industry and IT careers in particular?
I think we're going to end up automating most of the things we couldn't automate, in the last 20 years. So I kind of call it the last mile problem. And so, while we have automated accounting systems and we have automated database management systems, we're really able to automate information processing going forward. Now we're extending that to actual devices that are able to change our lives, robotics to build cars, the ability self-driving cars, the ability to, leverage AI and machine learning based systems to do a lot of the mundane tasks that we haven't had a chance of doing. And that's going to be a wave of things that occurs over the next 5 years. And what's exciting to me is trying to see the impact on IT. IT's reach within the value of the enterprise is going to be a lot more, than just a simple cost center. It does the, management of information on behalf of the company. And in essence, going to become the center of the universe for the company as IoT takes off and the digital economy starts to pick up, and we kind of realize the value of this stuff. And I think that it's going to be probably the most exciting time in my career when people kind of realize that at the board of directors levels, and it gets discussed more in the business circles. It gets discussed more as kind of a primary critical success factor for businesses. And I think it was like that for a long time. We just have never been able to kind of make the links, and now we're making the links.
Yeah, I've had similar conversations with other guests on the podcast about how IT is becoming more integrated with the actual business operations. And some companies they're now technology companies that have a business, if you see what I mean, rather than a business with a technology supporting function.
That's right. I think technology within the innovative companies out there is being used as a force multiplier for them to disrupt their markets. Of course, there's the Ubers and the Airbnbs and the Netflixes that everybody points to, but we're seeing insurance companies move into the space using disruptive technology, the ability to leverage different IoT-based systems to run manufacturing floors, automate various systems, and also the opening up of markets that are being created, self-driverless cars. But there's 20 other markets that really are kind of emerging around the availability of this technology, and people kind of capitalizing on these market shifts that are now increasing in the momentum, tenfold in the last 5 years. I think this is where we're going to separate the innovative and creative from those that are not. And ultimately, if you're innovative and creative, can leverage technology properly, you're going to win the game, disrupt the business, and own the markets. If you're not able to do that, you're going to fall by the wayside.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Absolutely. So we're going to move into the reveal round now. We're going to find out a little bit more about you and the way you think. You ready for this?
Sure.
So what first attracted you to a career in IT?
Oh, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to do nothing else. And so I was building computers. I remember the Timex Sinclair computers, and then I moved into the Commodore 64s and the PET-based computers and things like that. And so it was kind of a hobby for me. So really to do anything else was kind of out of the question. I just love computers. I love what they brought to bear. And I love the fact that, they could make our lives better. I probably didn't see the links as much when you're, looking at a pile of parts sitting on the floor and then trying to get, a 2K computer up and running. But ultimately, it's about building upon that. And so this is where I took my passion, turned it into my career. But I really started at 12 years old. That's when I got my first computer, I got my first kits, started to program the thing and really kind of study it on my own and become kind of a self-learner in the fact that I was building these things. Probably wasn't a very good student, but computers weren't a part of, what I was doing. And when computers became a part of what I was doing in college, that's where I started to accelerate and hit the gas pedal on where I wanted to go.
What is the best career advice you've ever received?
Listen to everybody. And I was told that one time, I think when I was young and probably a bit more of an egomaniac than I should have been, I was only listening to myself and, sometimes my boss. And the reality is, someone put forward, they said, there's a lot of good ideas here. A lot of people have input. And if you're not listening to that input, you're not necessarily getting the full 360-degree idea of what we're looking to do. And so I started to listen to people who were, low in the organization, interns, people I just hired, and get their ideas and kind of understand where they're looking to go. And the reality is, if they're bringing up something that they feel is important to them, chances are that's a pretty good idea and it deserves your attention. And there's sometimes ideas that, have changed the business patterns. They brought things to bear that I didn't think about. And that means that their creativity and innovation was for that day better than mine. And there's no reason I can't use it. I call it, other people's ideas. I think people live upon it. It's not necessarily stealing from other people, but you're learning from other people and combining what they know with what you know, to kind of reach new conclusions and kind of take everything to the next level.
Okay. If you were to begin your IT career again right now, what would you do?
I think I would ultimately get directly into architecture. In other words, the ability to understand the strategic nature of IT. Like everybody else who came up in IT during the time I was a programmer and, for many years and a very technical programmer, I did assembly and I did, some machine-based computer simulation for NASA, things like that. So I got down in the weeds, and ultimately I had to get above the weeds to look at the larger picture, what a database is and, what a network is and, how you do centralized computing versus distributed computing and what governance and security and all these other sorts of things, which were never really a part of my day-to-day life because we had very tactical positions that we put into. And I think IT still kind of behaves that way. So I would have loved to gone from the top down versus from the bottom up. And I found it a little bit more difficult to learn about things from the bottom up. And I think if I came from the top down, I was an architect. I understood how things were built and configured. And then I broke those down into more primitive things, such as programming and networking and APIs based system. I'd be much better in terms of learning where I am today. It's just kind of the way I learn.
Sure. I've not heard it put that way in previous interviews, so that's quite interesting to hear. What career objectives are you currently focusing on?
That's a good question because I think the reality is I don't have many career objectives anymore. I've kind of done everything I wanted to do. I'm very happy with my career. When CTP sold, I was, planning on retiring and, going off and writing a couple of books. She always retired to something, going off and writing a couple of books, perhaps doing some one-off consulting and, doing volunteer work and charity work and things like that. And I got this job at Deloitte, which was exactly the right place for me to be. And it's really trying to do and help as many people between now and when I retire. That sounds a little odd, I think, for lots of people. Okay, you're going to help people. But the reality is I get a kick out of helping my peers, people who work at Deloitte, my leadership, people who work for me, and then my clients in allowing them to kind of move forward and leverage this technology in new and innovative ways. And so I just really get a blast out of talking with people and explaining things and then having things explained to me and really kind of solving issues. I mean, one of the things I've done, I hit, many major retailers and manufacturers over the last 10 weeks at Deloitte. And I was able to, in essence, get into what their issues are and get into how we can take technology and leverage it to solve many of these things. And I'm not one who throws technology and throws hype-driven buzzwords to it. it's almost like a doctor-patient relationship. Tell them what they need to do and basically getting their data better and, getting their network infrastructure upgraded, getting their security upgraded before you move into the cloud. And if you do move into the cloud, these applications are indicated, these are not. And in essence, kind of avoid, some of the inefficiencies that people are taking moving into the cloud. And the benefit I'm able to bring is I've seen, hundreds of different problem domains and hundreds of different enterprises that are making this move. And I've seen the mistakes being made and I've seen the successes. And so I can pretty much determine pretty quickly as to, what advice they need to follow and at least give it to them. That doesn't mean I'm always right. It is a practice, but that means that I'm fairly confident in what I'm saying. I'm fairly confident that I'm going to improve most of them, if they follow the advice and if I help them follow the advice. And the other thing is doing stuff. It's not just saying it, but, going off and making it happen, being a doer as well as a talker.
And what's the number one non-technical skill that has helped you in your career so far?
Probably communication, what we're doing here. I think that one of the things that I was lacking in when I first started was the ability to talk to people and speak in public and, the written word. I was dyslexic when I came out of high school. A lot of people who go into computing are. I had a very hard time writing when I wrote. Things were misspelled. My grammar was awful. I just didn't really have the fundamentals there. And also when I talked, I thought it was very disconcerting. Said a lot of non-words. Those sorts of things when you start doing it. And after a while, it started to refine. I got better and better and better, and certainly better at the writing. And it was just through repetition. And so if I didn't have those skills, it was just out there as someone who's an SME in cloud computing and an SME and, all the various technical topics that I'm an SME in. And I wasn't able to explain it to people or talk to people. It wouldn't have an impact. You got to have both.
And David, can you share a parting piece of career advice with the IT Career Energizer audience?
Yeah, I know this is a cliche, but, do something you're passionate about. One of the things my father said to me is you can get paid $10 million a year and be underpaid for a job you don't like and you're not passionate about. And I truly agree with that. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to work for our money and we're going to have bad days and good days, as mentioned earlier. But largely, the career you pick should be something that gets you excited and gets you out of bed. And if that's not the case, don't do it. Life's too short. Go figure something else out.
Exactly, yeah. And finally, what's the best way we can find out more about you and connect with you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn or go to Deloitte.com and search on my name there. I have a blog there. Also, I have a blog on Infoworld.com. I've been there for about 15 years. I have my own podcast called the On Cloud Podcast on iTunes. You can go get those episodes, as well as Mike Cavus is one of the other podcasters on that show. Tech Target. Lots of stuff out there. Most of the non-vendor related cloud computing shows I'm speaking at. I'm pretty easy to find, and just keep up with me, let me know, and also reach out to me if you have any questions.
David, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been great chatting with you.
My pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening in to today's episode and to my guest career tips, advice, and experiences. You'll find a show notes page for today's episode on the IT Career Energizer website, which will be itcareerenergizer.com/e and then the number of today's episode. And a quick reminder that the show has now 3 episodes every week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So make sure that you are subscribed to the show to get new episodes automatically downloaded. Also, don't forget to join the IT Career Energizer community Facebook group. You'll get to engage with other like-minded people, get to find out more about upcoming guests and other episodes, and can get involved in the future direction of the podcast. It really is a great pleasure to be able to talk to so many inspirational people from across the industry and to be able to share their stories and advice with you. Thanks for listening, and remember, if you're not growing your career, you're slowing your career.
Thanks for listening to the IT Career Energizer podcast. To find out more about building a successful career in IT, visit itcareerenergizer.com.